Look at the mic. Thank you. Thank you. She said, for me. Is that for me? What's up, y'all? How bad do I need this mic? Like, do I really need it? Am I okay without it? Okay, I'm not going to use it. I like to move around a little bit if that's okay with y'all. Listen, I heard my mom spoke yesterday. Is that right? Look, I'm going to try my best to be as good and infectious as her, all right? Y'all let me know how I do. I appreciate y'all being here. Let's get this thing started. Jackie asked me to talk about habits today, and I'm super excited about that because, as you guys know, in the work that I do, it is very important for us to have healthy habits, right? And in the work that I do, it's also what typically compromises people's results, the lack of healthy habits, right? So I want to talk about habits today. Do me a favor, raise your hand if you've ever looked at someone, heard someone's story, admired someone, and was like, man, I wish I can be as consistent as them. That's good. That's good. Do me a favor, raise your hand if you've ever looked at someone, talked to someone, heard somebody's story, admired them, and was like, whoa, I wish I had that much discipline. Yep. Raise your hand if you would be happy to find out that there was a recipe, a formula for discipline and consistency and good habits. You don't have to just be born with it. Amen, amen. Y'all are in the right place. I am going to give you a formula today for creating healthy habits. Now, I read a book several years ago by a gentleman named Charles Duhigg, and he wrote a book called The Power of Habit, right? And in this book, Charles proposed this mechanism called the habit loop. And Charles said that simply, made very simple, how a habit works is there's a trigger, there's a habit, and then there's a reward. That's what Charles said in the book. He said that's the habit loop. He said it's quite simple. There's a trigger, there's a habit, and then there's a reward, right? And as I got to really thinking about this, I was like, okay, that's a kind of cool mechanism. But then I combined that with my 10 years of teaching, coaching, and speaking to real humans and listening to their behaviors and their struggles and their triumphs. And I'm like, Charles got it mostly right. But I think we need to add something to it because in order to create a healthy habit, there's a couple other parts of the formula that we need to add. Does that make sense? Because healthy habits, unlike bad habits, healthy habits take a little more energy. Healthy habits take a little more activation energy to park into place. Does that make sense? Have you guys experienced that? It's just a little more harder sometimes to wake up every day and exercise. It's a little harder sometimes to eat like you got some sense every day, right? It's just a little bit harder sometimes to save the money it's just a little harder sometimes, right? And I'm like, Charles, I don't know. I get it, trigger, habit, reward, but as I was thinking, I think there's something else that's missing from that formula. And as I thought back to all the people that I've talked to and that I've coached, what I realized is the fundamental thing that's missing from his mechanism is that in order to form healthy habits, it has to be preceded by a belief. See, Charles told us what happens in the physical. But as I got to thinking about it, because I like to break stuff down, like I like to think like a scientist, I realized I needed to know what happened in the psychological realm. Because most of us, I'm sure, we have developed a habit of wearing our seatbelt, have we not? So what's typically for us, the trigger is just getting in the car. And it's followed by the habit of buckling up, and we get the reward of safety, right? And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense for that. But can it be that simple for eating right, for movement, for rest, for sleeping, for breath work? Is it that simple, right? And when I realized, I said, oh, all the healthy habits that I've personally developed over the years, before it even got to a trigger, it started with a belief. So the groundbreaking news that I came to here to tell you today is if you want to be more consistent, it has to start with conviction. Consistency follows conviction. Behavior follows belief. If you want to change your habits, we change your beliefs. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so let me go a little deeper. So I was like, dang, when we think of habits, we typically think they're automatic. We think habits are automatic, like, because when we think habit, we think it's just something you do and you ain't got to think that much about it, right? And while we would love to wake up every day and drink our water, go into our prayer, our meditation, our breath work, our devotional, our workout, we would love to be kind to others. We would love to save money like we're supposed to. We would love to help old ladies across the street. We would love to do hard things. We would love all of that stuff to be great habits, right? But I realized that all of that, because it's not natural, right? What's natural was the easy stuff, like eating the junk food. What's natural was Netflix and chill. What's natural was just going along to get along. What's natural, but the stuff that really moves our lives forward and transforms us, it has to be, it takes more effort from the average human, right? And so as I was trying to put this all together, I started thinking about how I did it. So let me give you guys an example. In maybe 2000, no, it wasn't 2011. I can't even remember the year, y'all. It's been so many years, but I don't eat sugar anymore, right? I don't eat sugar anymore. And when I was eating sugar, it followed the mechanism that Charles taught. There was a trigger. I was in my feelings. There was a habit, a donut, and there was a reward, temporary relief, right? And so when I was like, that definitely works. But I had to think about, well, what did I do when I stopped eating sugar? Like, how did that look when I stopped eating sugar? And I realized when I used to, because I speak so much, and because I teach so much, and because I coach so much, and because what I do is based in science, I have to always have access to the information. And what began happening when I was teaching, I would be on stage and I was speaking, and people would ask me questions, and I'm trying to deliver information, and I would have lapses in my memory. And I realized it was because I had that glass of wine the night before. So somebody will book me to be on their stage, and here I am trying to prepare a talk so that I can deliver my best work. And I'm like, why I'm struggling with concentration? And I realized it was that dessert I just had to have after my meal. And so I was like, okay, now we're at a crossroads. Because let me tell you about the blessing of standing here before you today. Jackie has trusted me with y'all. What I'm doing is a divine assignment, but it only happens when somebody trusts you with their audience. Every stage that I get on, somebody has told their people, I'm trusting the person I'm bringing before you to pour into you. And so now I have a responsibility to deliver on what Jackie has asked me to do. And sugar was compromising that assignment. So now I was at a crossroads, because when I learned, like, we all know what sugar does to us from the neck down. We don't want to eat it because we don't want to gain weight. We don't want the inflammation. We don't want the neuropathy. We don't want the diabetes. We don't want the heart disease. But I don't think most people understand what happens from the neck up. And so when I understood that, like, Alzheimer's was diabetes 3, because that's how much blood sugar impacts memory. When I understood better that your ability to concentrate, your executive functioning, your problem solving, even your emotional regulation was impacted by sugar, I realized I could no longer have it. So the question became, Lisa, how did you develop a healthy habit of refraining from sugar at all times? No, I'm serious. Like, I can be on a resort that's all inclusive. Amen? 24/7 access to desserts at every buffet. All right. I can be at a resort that's all inclusive, where they got tequila sunrises for breakfast. Right? I can walk amongst donuts and sugar and cakes and pies and not touch it. And that's not because God blessed me with an extra dose of discipline or consistency. It's because I developed conviction. Once I understood that sugar compromises my assignment, once I understood that sugar compromises my spirit of excellence, it was easy to stop eating it. Does that make sense? Yes. Conviction is how we are consistent, not willpower. If you want to change your habits, you change your beliefs. See, because if you believe that it's not safe to speak up, you will create a habit of muting yourself in life. If you believe that breath work can really regulate your nervous system, you will create a habit of breathing every day. If you believe that movement keeps you alive, you will create a habit of movement. If you believe that eating like you got some sense can heal the body and reverse disease, you will eat healthy every single day. If you believe, then the habit will follow. Does that make sense? And so all of us that are here before you today, Patrick, Nicole, myself, if you believe that community and exposure transforms your life, you would just create a retreat every year. I need y'all to understand how what we do and how we think is a reflection of what we believe first. Our habits are dictated by our beliefs. So now I want to give you a new formula. So I told you, Charles gave us one. I wasn't that pleased with it. I felt like we needed to enhance it because working with you guys, I know that beliefs have to precede this thing. Okay, so beliefs are part of the equation. So I'm about to give you a new formula. This is noteworthy. This is noteworthy. This is your formula. Y'all ready? Okay, pens, pencils, phones, wherever you're going to write this down. This is noteworthy. Here's the new formula for how to create a habit. The first is going to be the belief. It's going to be the conviction. And that comes from exposure. That comes from learning new things, right? That comes from new information. That comes from community. That comes from being in ecosystems with people who have already done what you're trying to do, and you can attach yourself to what we call a possibility model. Somebody who's modeling what you're trying to achieve. So the first step in creating a healthy habit is a new belief. It is not willpower. It is what I'm currently believing is not working for me. So the next time you are talking to the experts, before you ask them what to do, before you allow Patrick to write you a personalized plan, before you have Nicole walk you through more breath work, the first question you want to ask them is, what do I need to believe? Tell me what the people who you work with that are successful, what do they believe that keeps them consistent? Does that make sense? Okay, because when I believed that every time I ate sugar, it compromised my performance, my excellence, and my assignment, I stopped eating it. I already knew what it did from the neck down, but I'm like, I can afford a little cookie, right? People will look at me and say, you can afford a cookie. Nah, I cannot. I got a message to deliver because I don't think y'all understand. It not only compromises my memory, it not only compromises my ability to concentrate, but it compromises my hearing. Oh, not audible, spiritual.
All right now, go ahead now.
Because let me tell you how I create my talks. So Kiwi is my right hand. Y'all know that by now, right? And so she knows that, like, you can book me months in advance. You can book me a year in advance. But I'm not really going to know what I'm going to say on your stage till about 24, 48, 72 hours ahead of time, right? And so Kiwi knows around the time that God talks to me for what I need to say on the stage, right? As a matter of fact, we was on the plane ride here. We was on our first flight from Houston to Atlanta. We had a layover in Atlanta. And Kiwi was like, God, give you the message yet? I said, it's coming, right? Right? She already know. I was like, he gave me a little tidbit on the first flight. I'm flushing it out now. And then I had the rest of it by the time. Okay, she like, okay. But what used to happen is when I ate sugar, my hearing was distorted. So some of you guys are looking for answers for things. You're praying for the clarity and the revelation. And I'm telling you, developing healthy habits starts with your belief, and you got to be able to hear from God. When the channels are clogged, you can't hear clearly. Does that make sense? So I'm telling you, everything starts with, I need to believe that every time I put this foolishness in my body, I need to believe that every time I decide to be sedentary, I need to believe every time I decide to overwork instead of resting, I need to believe that it compromises something. And my conviction has to be stronger than the temptation. That means I can walk on an all-inclusive resort and not touch nothing. And I'm not struggling to not touch it. Because I knew if I had dessert or a drink yesterday, I was gonna come in here and not be my best self. And not to brag, but I've been doing this a long time. Here's the worst part about it. You guys wouldn't even know I wasn't doing my best. Because I've developed mastery. But I would know. I'm not clear, I'm not in a moment, I'm not in flow. Right? And that's the danger of having mastery, because you can get up in front of people and they won't even know you're not giving your best. But that's why one of my core values is I live with integrity. Right? All right, so the formula, this is noteworthy. The first is belief. The first is belief. I have to change my beliefs. The second step, there's only 4. The second is after the belief becomes a non-negotiable behavior. Habits ain't just habits first. Habits is what we call them when they've matured. When they're in infancy stages, they're called non-negotiables. What does that mean? The behavior matures to a habit, but it starts as a non-negotiable. A non-negotiable means it's still in the manual phase. I literally got to think about drinking the water every day. I literally got to think about doing the exercise every day. It's not, or I don't just pop up and get to it, right? So before it matures to a habit, it begins as a non-negotiable. Does that make sense? So that means you're going to get in rooms like this. You're going to have really good, juicy conversations. You're going to be poured into, and some things are going to start shifting for you. You're going to start believing that things are possible for you. You're going to start believing like, wow, this don't have to be a life sentence. Like I can really heal from, like I can do something about this. You're going to start believing in yourself. You're going to start believing in your voice. And so now you got new beliefs are being embedded into you, but a new belief don't mean you just automatically turn on a switch and start doing things differently. There's still work. So these first 2 steps are manual. Belief, non-negotiable. Does that make sense? That means upon waking, I meditate every day. I do it automatically now, but it didn't start that way, right? I had to put effort into it at first. But then here's what happened. When you do it consistently using effort long enough, you look up one day and now it's a habit that you don't have to think about anymore. So a non-negotiable graduates to a habit. Does that make sense? And then the final thing is the reward. So we got the belief, a non-negotiable behavior, because my belief has told me that this behavior is necessary. The behavior will then graduate to a habit, and then you get the reward. First 2 are manual, second 2 are automatic. That's the formula for how we create healthy habits. Does that make sense? Okay. So a lot of times when we are in situations where we are tempted and we're wondering why we can't stay the course, it's because we haven't developed these non-negotiables. And your belief is what makes the non-negotiable stick. But let me tell you this, we were having a great conversation. I treated my team to dinner last night at the all-inclusive resort. I said, dinner on me, ladies. Dinner on me. Get whatever you want, right? You work with me, you're going to eat good. And so we went to dinner last night and we were having, this conversation about belief. And somebody asked at the table, well, like, how do you do that though? I know what my problem is. And I know y'all, it's probably about 18,000 degrees in this room. Y'all real smart. And that usually that works in your favor in the corporate world, but sometimes it hinders you spiritually and psychologically because you outsmart yourself, right? You outsmart yourself. And so what happens with really, really smart people is they're hyper self-aware, and they unfortunately believe that self-awareness means they're qualified to solve the problem. They come to me and say this all the time, Lisa, I know what my problem is. I just don't believe it. I know what my problem is. It's just the sugar. I know what my problem. And I'm like, that's cool, but I'm gonna need you to double check the degree on your wall. It says accountant. It says law. It says doctor. Even though you're self-aware, that don't mean you're qualified to solve the problem, right? So when I said all that to say, last night when we was at dinner, right, we were having this conversation and we were talking about what our challenges were. But then somebody asked, but then now what do we do? And I said, oh, you got to stay close to the fire, right? You think because you have been in rooms like this and you've heard information, you are confusing comprehension with embodiment. That means I understand you very clearly, Lisa, when you tell me that sugar does this to the brain. I understand you very clearly when you tell me I need to get all that saturated fat and excess oil out of my diet. Like, I understood, like I conceptually understood when Nicole taught yesterday about breath work. But the reason we don't go out and do it is because then we remove ourselves from the fire because we think because I understood it, because I comprehended it, that meant I embodied it. Embodiment is not the same as comprehension. Comprehension is what happens when you're smart. You guys are super smart, right? So you get this information. It makes sense to you, write it down, and y'all be bold enough to repeat it back to other people. Ain't lived it for the first, but you like, no, let me tell you what you need to do, right? Because y'all super smart. So when she asked me, but how do I then get this new belief to override this current belief that's hindering me? I said, you gotta stay close to the fire. That means you gotta stay in community, right? You need to be a part of your local girl track. Like, don't think as you understand why walking is important, that you can then go remove yourself from the ecosystem that does it. Does that make sense? So how do I change my beliefs, coach? I stay close to the fire until I've embodied it, until the non-negotiable has graduated to a habit. That makes sense, everybody? Because look, my belief's so strong. Like y'all, I know y'all done seen Kiwi's muscles, but my convictions outmuscle any trigger that ever could exist. Your convictions and your beliefs have to outmuscle temptation. Does that make sense? That means I can sit amongst it, I can be around it, and I'm not tempted at all. I don't care what it is. Your convictions have to outmuscle the temptation. So, we got the formula. We know it's beliefs. We understand that we have to be in ecosystems. We're not just learning information, but we're staying long enough to embody the information, because comprehension and embodiment are two different things, right? We understand that we then have to create a non-negotiable habit, and a non-negotiable is going to take activation energy. It's not going to be automatic just yet, right? But when it's paired with that belief, it's going to become easier and easier. And this happens quicker than y'all think. Before we wrap up, I'm gonna prove this to y'all. This happens way quicker than y'all think. Anybody remember in COVID-19, a lot of us developed a lot of habits almost overnight. Yes. How many people still to this day wash your hands as soon as you walk in the house? Anybody? I do. Instantly. Sometimes, before it used to be kind of hit or miss. But there was a belief that preceded the behavior, right? So what happened is that we were all immersed in the same occurrence, and we all adopted very quickly a belief that not washing our hands could result sickness, illness, potentially death. So this don't take long. You have evidence that a belief can shift very quickly. Does that make sense? This doesn't take long to happen, but that's because we were all immersed in that content together. Stay close to the fire. Does that make sense? Yeah. The closer you are to the fire, the quicker the belief becomes embodied, the quicker the behavior becomes a habit.
Repeat that one more time.
Because I can. Yes. Look, the closer you stay to the fire, the quicker the belief becomes embodied, and the quicker the behavior becomes a habit. Right? No sugar on display.
And how do you stay close to the fire?
So you stay connected to the community, right? You do not stop engaging. You do not stop showing up just because you comprehended everything, right? Also, so you got community is one way to stay close to the fire. And then another way, Vanessa, is you latch on even more intimately to a possibility model.
All right.
Right? So who's modeling what you want to do? Who was the young lady who was like, I'm going to have my own retreat? Is that Pete? Right there? Okay, when we did the girl track walk, right? She came in front and was like, I'm going to have a panel. So who should she be close to?
Jackie.
It's a possibility model, right? Who's doing what I want to do? But more importantly, because you're not modeling their behavior, y'all, you modeling their beliefs. So the first thing she should ask Jackie before, how do I create something like this? She should ask her, what do I need to believe? Let me model your beliefs before I try and model your behaviors. Anybody else tried to model somebody else's behavior and couldn't quite get it like they had it? Yeah. Because limiting beliefs are roadblocks. So Jackie could give her the blueprint. But if she happens to believe, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart, not enough people will listen to me, nobody will pay me for anything, and she's not going to execute. So it's not enough to have the blueprint and the strategy. You first have to have the conviction. Does that make sense? So this stuff don't take long. It don't take long. Listen, let's wrap this thing up. I was on a flight a couple weeks ago, right? Now I'm late to the party. And I, for the first time, saw Luther Vandross documentary. Why y'all ain't tell me? You ain't seen it? Man, I'm so slow, Janelle. When I watched it on Delta, I thought it had just dropped because I hadn't heard about it. So I'm like, this must have just came out this week, right? Luther Vandross documentary. Yeah, it's called Never Too Much. Excellent, right? So I'm watching this documentary, and I'm like, dang, this must have just came out. Now I'm like, let me go to YouTube, see what they saying about the documentary. It's comments from a year ago. I was like, this has been out that long, right? I'm slow, right? And so anyway, I'm watching it, and it was very interesting learning about Luther. And we all know he struggled with a lot of things most of his life. You know what I mean? He struggled with a lot of things, and he had a lot of challenges, especially with his weight and eating and emotional eating, but also with his identity and not feeling safe to be public about who he was, right? And I'm like, man, the amount of stress that brings upon you, the amount of stress. Luther said he thought about food from the moment he woke up to the moment he went to sleep. That was his comfort. When you are emotionally distressed and internally in battle, right? And you feel like you go out in the world every day and you self-betray, you betray yourself, it causes an exorbitant amount of stress. And chronic stress kills. Chronic stress kills. It has the potential to take 3 to 5 years off your life. And so Luther was trying to eat his feelings because it wasn't safe to be who he wanted to be, and then he had this pressure from this industry, and then he was performing in a time, we still in a time where, you know, being black in that industry, you was getting robbed, and Luther was going through it privately. The amount of stress. So what am I saying? I'm saying that when you get the belief and the conviction, and then you develop the habits, but then you are flip-flopping with the habits, and you are in and you are out, and you are some days and maybes, and that's a form of self-betrayal. And that form of self-betrayal will slowly eat away at your confidence. And when that slowly eats away at your confidence, then it starts allowing those intrusive thoughts and those limiting beliefs to creep in about what you're capable of and what's possible for you. So every time we know what we should be doing, and we've decided that in that season of life, it's best for us to do that thing, and we don't do it, that form of self-betrayal will compromise everything else you're trying to do. Does that make sense? Yes. That makes sense. So listen, Luther was like, I love it, this is my favorite part. Luther, the interviewer asked Luther, they said, Luther, out of your whole catalog, what is your favorite song that you ever did? They asked Luther. He said, Any Love? And the interviewer said, well, why is Any Love your favorite song? Out of all the songs you done made and all the hits you done had. And he said, because when I wrote that song, it was exactly where I was in life at that time. He said, Any Love was my most autobiographical moment. Luther said that was my truest self in that moment. And I encourage you guys to show up every day and work your tail off to be the most authentic version of you. Because he has displayed to us what happens when we don't. And so I want you guys to understand the power of developing habits, but adhering to those habits, not betraying yourself. Because being your most authentic self in this life is the way you live the longest, it's the way you extract the most joy, and it's the way you serve the most people. Thank you. Thank y'all. Love you too, Mom.
see you.